Blood, fire, explosion. Marcus Washington pulled her from the wreckage at 9:47 p.m. on a Tuesday in October. The boardroom on the 68th floor of Hartley Global Tower erupted in flames that swallowed oxygen faster than lungs could process. Victoria Hartley, 32-year-old billionaire CEO, was trapped behind a wall of fire that reached the ceiling with fingers of orange and black. Smoke filled her lungs. 60 seconds of consciousness remained, maybe less. The sprinkler system had failed. The emergency exits were locked from the outside. This was no accident. This was murder. Marcus Washington, the night janitor working 3 floors below, heard the alarms. He'd lost 7 brothers to fire in Fallujah 9 years ago. Every instinct in his Marine Corps trained body screamed, "Run, protect yourself, live to fight another day." But he'd made a promise 6 years ago at his wife's grave, rain soaking through his dress blues, while he held a 2-year-old daughter who didn't understand why mama wouldn't wake up. Never let another person die if I can prevent it. He ran toward the fire. What happened in the next 90 seconds would change both their lives forever. The explosion that followed ended his anonymous existence and began something neither of them had words for yet. Something that would force a billionaire to choose between her empire and her heart. Something that would make a broken warrior remember he was still capable of protecting what mattered. But that moment lived 90 seconds in the future. First came the fire, title card 48 hours earlier. Rain hammered the windows of the small 2-bedroom apartment in Queens at 5:30 on a Monday morning. Marcus Washington's alarm pulled him from dreams where Sarah still sang in the kitchen and Zoe still had a mother. The Nokia flip phone, ancient by modern standards, exactly how he preferred it, buzzed against the nightstand with the persistence of something mechanical and unfeeling. He silenced it before the second ring and lay still for 3 seconds, letting consciousness reassemble the fragments of who he was now versus who he used to be. Staff Sergeant Marcus J. Washington, 2nd Battalion, 7th Marines, 2 Purple Hearts, and a Bronze Star, existed only in a locked footlocker under his bed. The man who woke in this apartment was a 36-year-old single father who earned $34,000 a year pushing a mop. The transformation had been deliberate, necessary, survival. He brewed coffee in a pot older than his daughter. The cheap grounds tasted like cardboard and regret, but caffeine was caffeine. He stood at the window watching the city wake across the East River. Manhattan's skyline rose distant and glittering, a world apart from this 4th-floor walk-up, where the stairs groaned and the electricity hummed with the constant note of barely adequate. His body ached in the way bodies do when they've been broken and reassembled wrong. The right leg, destroyed by an IED outside Kabul 8 years ago, throbbed with the particular pain that arrived before weather changes. The doctors at Walter Reed had said he'd never walk again. Marine Corps discipline said otherwise. He walked. He just carried the reminder with him every step. Gunnery Sergeant Morrison had drilled mantras into every recruit at Paris Island. One persisted, "Push through discomfort. The mission matters more than the man." Turned out the mantra worked in civilian life too, when the mission was raising a daughter and the discomfort was constant. Daddy Zoe's voice carried from her bedroom, small and sleep-rough. Marcus moved through the narrow hallway, the limp more pronounced in mornings before muscles warmed and joints remembered how to cooperate. He found his daughter sitting up in bed, clutching the stuffed elephant Sarah had given her 2 days before the accident. That wasn't an accident. "I dreamed about Mama again." Marcus lowered himself to her level knee, protesting the movement. His hands, scarred from equipment, handling calloused from mop handles and cleaning solutions, were still gentle when they touched her shoulder. "Good dream or sad dream?" "Good." She was singing. "But then she had to go and I couldn't follow." He pulled her into his arms, feeling her small heartbeat against his chest. 8 years old. She barely remembered Sarah except in fragments and photographs in the hole where a mother should be. The therapist at the VA had said children process grief differently, that Zoe might not fully understand what she'd lost until she was older. Marcus knew better. No. His daughter understood perfectly. She just didn't have adult words for the absence that shaped her world. "Your mama loved you more than the whole sky, baby girl. She's always with you. Every time you draw something beautiful, that's her." Zoe pulled back, her face serious in the way children's faces get when they're processing truths too large for their years. "Mrs. Chen says everyone has an angel. Is Mama mine best angel you could ask for?" The lie tasted like ash. Marcus didn't believe in angels or heaven or any of the comfortable fictions people told themselves about death. He'd seen too many bodies held too many hands while life drained into desert sand. Death was final and absolute, and the only thing that came after was absence. But Zoe needed her mother to be somewhere needed to believe Sarah watched over her, so Marcus gave her that fiction, wrapped in conviction. He braided her hair while she chattered about her drawing project for school. A mural about what family means. Her fingers were already stained with marker ink evidence of preliminary sketches. Sarah had been artistic too. Zoe inherited that along with the curls Marcus struggled to tame each morning. I'm drawing you and me, but there's a space, his hands paused mid-braid. Space for what I don't know yet. But I'll know when I see it. The answer unsettled him in ways he couldn't articulate. He finished the braid in silence. The photograph on the refrigerator caught morning light, as it did every morning, a ritual of remembrance Marcus couldn't escape even if he wanted to. Marcus at 28, younger and unbroken in his marine dress blues. Sarah beside him in her wedding dress, laughing at something outside the frame. Behind them, the American flag and 7 groomsmen, his brothers from 2nd Battalion 7th Marines. 6 of them were dead now. 80 snipers, suicide bombers, the mathematics of war, grinding through young men who believed in honor and country and brotherhood. The 7th Tommy Rodriguez was at Walter Reed with no legs and half a face of awe in the technical sense, but destroyed in every way that mattered. Survivor's guilt. The VA psychiatrist had labeled it during mandatory counseling sessions Marcus attended because the alternative was losing his medical benefits. As if guilt was something you survived instead of something you carried a weight that never decreased, only became familiar. They rode the subway together into Manhattan, Zoe's small hand in his, her backpack decorated with butterfly stickers bumping against his hip. He dropped her at PS 118 Public School 118 3 blocks from Hartley Global Tower and watched her disappear through doors painted institutional green. Then he walked to work through streets already crowded with people who moved like they had destinations that mattered. Hartley Global Tower rose 72 floors of steel and glass in Midtown Manhattan, a monument to medical innovation and corporate power. The company manufactured surgical equipment, diagnostic machines, devices that saved lives in operating rooms across 6 continents. The building itself was a study in architectural excess marble lobbies, executive elevators, with voice-activated controls, a rooftop helipad that serviced exactly one person. Marcus entered through the service entrance at 6:30 in the evening. The night shift ran 7 to 3, 5 days a week, $34,000 a year before taxes. Zoe stayed with Mrs. Chen downstairs during those hours, did homework, ate dinner, went to bed at 9. The arrangement worked because Mrs. Chen was 73 and lonely and liked having a child in her apartment. Marcus paid her what he could, which wasn't much, but she'd known Sarah, and that created obligations that transcended money. He clocked in at the security desk where Rodriguez, no relation to Tommy, just the coincidence of a common name, barely glanced up from his phone. Washington. 68's got a big meeting tonight. Brennan's orders. Nobody goes up there except board members. Marcus nodded and moved past. The locker room smelled like industrial cleaner and the particular staleness of spaces men passed through, but never inhabited. He changed into his uniform navy blue coveralls with Hartley Global embroidered over the breast pocket, and collected his cart from the supply room. Carlos intercepted him in the hallway. 58 years old, 22 years with the company, Carlos had worked maintenance since before Marcus was born. He knew every duct, every wire, every secret the building kept. Man, you hear about the meeting tonight? Brennan's got the boardroom locked down tight. Even security can't go in. What you think that's about? Not our business, Carlos. Carlos laughed, a sound like gravel shifting. You always say that. 6 years in this place, you never gossip, never complain, never even take sick days. What are you, some kind of robot? Just trying to do my job. Well, your job's about to get interesting. Heard CEO's staying late too. Victoria Hartley herself. Don't usually see her after 8. Marcus filed the information without comment and moved toward the service elevator. 6 years in Fallujah had taught him notice everything, react to nothing, trust no one except your brothers. The habit persisted even in civilian life, even when the enemy was poverty and loneliness instead of insurgents with RPGs. He worked the lower floors first, emptying trash bins full of discarded ambitions and half-eaten lunches that cost more than his hourly wage. mopping corridors where lawyers and consultants walked without seeing him, cleaning conference rooms where decisions affecting thousands of lives were made by people who'd never missed a meal or worried about rent. The invisibility didn't bother him. He preferred it. Being seen meant questions, conversations, the performance of social interaction. He'd lost capacity for somewhere between his second deployment and Sarah's funeral. Better to be furniture, a function, rather than a person, someone who cleaned and left no trace. But tonight, something felt wrong. He couldn't name it, couldn't point to specific evidence, just the crawling sensation between his shoulder blades that had kept him alive through 4 deployments. The same instinct that made him check corners before entering rooms, that made him count exits and identify cover positions even in civilian spaces where the only threat was boredom. At 9:15, he smelled it. Smoke. Not cigarette smoke. Chemical smoke. Burning plastic and accelerant, the particular scent that preceded catastrophe. Every nerve in his body lit up with recognition. Fallujah, September 2016. The building fire that killed Danny Chen and cost Tommy Rodriguez everything below the waist. That fire had started with this smell, this exact combination of polymer combustion and gasoline. He abandoned his cart and ran toward the stairwell. His legs screamed protest. He ignored it. The mission mattered more than discomfort. The mission mattered more than the man. The fire alarm shrieked to life as he hit the stairs. Emergency lights stuttered on, bathing everything in red. He climbed toward the smoke source, taking steps 3 at a time, despite the agony radiating from his knee to his hip to his spine. 68th floor, the executive boardroom level, where Victoria Hartley was working late, where Marcus Brennan had forbidden anyone to enter. The stairwell door to 68 was hot to the touch. Marcus pulled his shirt over his face and kicked it open. The hallway beyond was an inferno. Flames reached the ceiling, fed by something accelerant-soaked. The sprinkler system hung useless. Overhead, dry pipes that should have been gushing water. Deliberate. Someone had disabled the suppression system. Marcus keyed his radio with shaking hands. Carlos call, 911. Fire on 68 sprinklers, down, possible arson. Static answered, then Carlos's voice high with panic. Jesus Christ, Marcus. Get out of there. Can't. Someone's inside. He didn't wait for Carlos to argue. He soaked his work shirt in the emergency fountain lukewarm water that did nothing against the heat already scorching his exposed skin, wrapped it around his head, and ran through the flames. The boardroom door was industrial steel, sealed with a deadbolt that should have been unlocked from inside but wasn't. Someone had secured it from the hallway. Trapped whoever was inside. Help, someone help. The voice was female, barely audible through steel and fire, and the roar of combustion consuming everything flammable. But Marcus heard it, heard the terror in the resignation, the sound of someone who'd accepted they were going to die. Not today. He grabbed the fire axe from the emergency case, shattered glass, pulled the axe free, and swung. Once. Twice. The lock held. Third swing, fourth, his shoulders burning with effort, lungs screaming for oxygen that wasn't there. Fifth swing. Sixth. The lock shattered. The door burst open. Smoke poured out in a wave that knocked him backward. Through the haze, he saw her. Victoria Hartley, the CEO. The woman whose face appeared in Forbes and Fortune and every business publication that tracked the movements of power. Collapsed against the window, barely conscious, her expensive suit ash-covered and torn. "Ma'am, can you hear me?" She looked up. Their eyes met. Time stopped. 3 seconds that felt like 3 hours. In that glance, something passed between them that transcended circumstance, that reached past the fire and the fear to something deeper. Recognition not of faces but of souls that had been alone too long, that had forgotten what connection felt like until it slammed into them with the force of revelation. Her eyes were blue, impossibly blue, even through the smoke and the chaos. Blue like Sarah's had been, like the sky over Kabul before the insurgent mortars started falling. Blue like the last piece of beauty in a world determined to burn. Then the ceiling beam cracked. Marcus lunged forward. He grabbed Victoria, pulled her into his arms as the beam crashed into the spot where she'd been standing. She was lighter than he expected, all sharp angles and no mass, the kind of thin that came from forgetting to eat rather than choosing not to. "Hold on to me." She wrapped her arms around his neck without hesitation, without the ego that should have made a billionaire CEO reluctant to trust a janitor. Maybe fear stripped away those pretensions. Maybe she recognized in him what he'd seen in her, someone who'd survived too much to have pride left. He ran toward the stairwell, one arm supporting her back, one under her knees, his leg threatening to collapse with every step. The pain was white hot and absolute nerve endings, screaming that this was impossible, that the leg couldn't take this weight, that something would tear or break or fail. He ran anyway. The mission matters more than the man. They were 10 feet from the stairwell when the gas line exploded. The blast wave hit them from behind with the force of God's fist. Marcus twisted midair, taking the impact on his back, shielding Victoria with his body, the way he'd shielded Tommy Rodriguez from shrapnel 8 years ago. They tumbled down the stairs, 7 steps, 8, 9. Marcus's head cracking against concrete with a sound like a gunshot. Vision blurred, blood filled his mouth. Victoria's weight pressed against him, her face inches from his ash-covered and beautiful and alive. Don't, don't you dare die. Her voice came from very far away, filtered through the ringing in his ears and the gathering darkness at the edges of his vision. Not today, ma'am. Then sirens. Footsteps pounding upstairs, hands pulling them apart, separating them, despite Victoria's protests. Male, mid-30s, head trauma, second-degree burns, possible concussion. That was a paramedic. Marcus tried to focus on the voice, tried to stay conscious long enough to make sure Victoria was safe, but consciousness was a rope he couldn't hold. Who is he? What's his name? Victoria's voice, desperate and demanding even while choking on smoke. Marcus Washington. Janitorial staff. Janitor. He saved. Darkness took her before she finished. Darkness took Marcus 3 seconds later. White ceiling, antiseptic smell, IV in his arm, feeding fluids he didn't need because Marines didn't need medical intervention. They just needed mission objectives and enough ammunition. Except he wasn't a Marine anymore. Hadn't been for 8 years. Was just a man in a hospital bed with burns on his arms and a concussion that made the room tilt when he tried to sit up. Mr. Washington, easy. You've been unconscious for 6 hours. The nurse was young, maybe 25, with the kind of professional compassion that came from training rather than genuine feeling. Marcus had seen enough military nurses to know the difference. My daughter, Zoe. Where is she's here? Your neighbor brought her. The little girl's been sleeping in that chair since 2 a.m. Marcus turned his head despite the spike of pain the movement caused. Zoe was curled in the visitor's chair, her backpack under her head, her sketchbook clutched against her chest. Tear tracks stained her cheeks even in sleep. His heart broke in ways the IED never managed. How long do I need to stay? 24 hours observation minimum. You have a concussion, second-degree burns on your forearms, and your medical history shows I'm leaving. Mr. Washington, I strongly advise, I appreciate that, but I'm leaving. He signed the AMA forms against medical advice with shaking hands, while the nurse explained he was taking his life in his hands, and the hospital wouldn't be responsible, and insurance might not cover. Marcus nodded at the appropriate intervals and didn't mention that he had no insurance, that the VA covered emergencies, but not hospital stays, that he couldn't afford to miss work because rent was due in 12 days and Mrs. Chen needed payment. He woke Zoe gently. She startled awake, saw him, and burst into tears. Daddy, you're okay, Mrs. Chen said, you saved someone and there was fire. And I'm okay, baby. I'm okay. He held her while she cried, his burned arms screaming, protest, his head pounding with each heartbeat, none of it mattering because his daughter needed him, and that was the only equation that counted. They were preparing to leave. Marcus changed into spare clothes. Carlos had brought Zoe, clutching his hand like she'd never let go when Victoria Hartley appeared in the doorway. She looked different without the ash and the fear. Cleaned up, wearing clothes someone had brought, her hair pulled back in a style that probably cost more than Marcus's monthly rent. But her eyes were the same blue, and they locked onto his with intensity that made his breath catch. Mr. Washington. Her voice was hoarse from smoke inhalation but steady. CEO voice. The kind of voice that commanded boardrooms and negotiated billion-dollar deals without blinking. Ma'am, are you the angel? Zoe's question broke the moment. Victoria's gaze dropped to his daughter, her expression softening in ways that suggested this was unfamiliar territory. What daddy saved an angel tonight? Mrs. Chen said so. Are you hurt? Victoria knelt, ignoring the hospital gown she still wore, putting herself at eye level with an 8-year-old. I'm the person your daddy saved. What's your name? Zoe Washington. What's yours, Victoria? Zoe studied her with the unfiltered scrutiny children employed when adults weren't watching. You're pretty, like Daddy's pictures of Mama. The words landed like physical blows. Marcus felt his chest tighten, felt the familiar grief rise up to choke him. Victoria's eyes flickered to him, reading something in his expression he hadn't meant to show. Your daddy is very brave, I know. He was a Marine. He doesn't talk about it, but I found his medals. Victoria stood, her attention returning to Marcus with new understanding. Marine, that explains the scars. And why you ran toward the fire when everyone else ran away. Just did what needed doing, ma'am. The hospital wanted to keep you. Why did you leave? Because I can't afford to stay. Because my daughter needs me. Because hospitals are where people go to die, and I've seen enough death. He didn't say any of that, just shrugged, had to get home. Victoria pulled a business card from her purse, pristine white embossed lettering that screamed money. My personal number. Call me. There are things we need to discuss. Ma'am, I appreciate the thought, but I don't need you save my life, Mr. Washington. Let me thank you properly. No thanks necessary, just doing my job. Her jaw tightened. She wasn't used to being refused, that much was obvious. The very rich rarely heard no, insulated by layers of assistants and staff who made sure reality bent to their preferences. At least take the card. He did, because refusing twice would be rude, and Zoe was watching, and he tried to model politeness, even when every instinct said, maintain distance, don't let the rich woman get close. Nothing good comes from crossing class lines. They left before Victoria could say anything else. The apartment felt smaller after 6 hours away. Marcus made Zoe breakfast cereal and orange juice, nothing fancy, while she chattered about Mrs. Chen teaching her to play mahjong and how she'd drawn a picture of him fighting fire like a superhero. Can I see the picture? She pulled her sketchbook from her backpack. The drawing was crude but effective. Marcus in his work uniform, surrounded by flames, carrying a stick figure with yellow hair. In the corner watching was a smaller figure labeled me, with a heart above it. That's beautiful, baby. I'm going to give it to Miss Victoria, so she remembers you saved her. You don't need to do that, but I want to. She seems sad, like she doesn't have anybody. Like us before you. The observation cut deeper than it should. Zoe was right. Victoria Hartley had worn loneliness like expensive perfume, something she'd grown so accustomed to she didn't notice anymore. Maybe we'll see her again. Maybe we won't. Either way, you did good making her feel welcome. Zoe nodded and went back to drawing. Marcus watched her, this small person who'd survived losing her mother before she could remember her, who'd never once complained about living in a cramped apartment or wearing secondhand clothes or having a father who worked nights. Sarah would have been proud. The thought arrived unwelcome, carrying with it the weight of 6 years of grief. Sarah Washington Nay Chen, 28 years old when she died, accountant at Hartley Global, discovered something terrible in the company's financial records and died 2 days later when her brake lines failed and her car crashed into a bridge support at 60 miles per hour. The police had investigated. Brake line corrosion, they'd concluded. Faulty maintenance, tragic accident. Case closed in 72 hours. Marcus had known better. Brake lines didn't corrode in 1 week. Sarah had just taken the car to the shop. Someone had cut those lines. Someone with resources and motivation and the power to make investigations disappear. He'd tried to pursue it. Hired a lawyer with money he didn't have, demanded reopening the case. The lawyer had looked at the police report, at Marcus's lack of evidence, at the power differential between a widow with no resources and Hartley Global with infinite lawyers, and suggested accepting reality. So Marcus had buried his wife, held his 2-year-old daughter, and swallowed rage that never dissipated, only compressed into something dense and quiet. Then he'd gotten a job at Hartley Global. Night shift, janitor, invisible, close enough to watch and wait. If whoever killed Sarah was still there, eventually they'd make a mistake. Eventually Marcus would find proof. 6 years, no mistakes, no proof. Just endless nights pushing a mop through corridors where his wife had walked, working for the company that had killed her. Until Tuesday night, until the fire, until Victoria Hartley's blue eyes meeting his through smoke and fear. His phone buzzed, unknown number. Text message. You should have let her burn Marine. Now you're both targets. Watch your daughter. Ice flooded his veins. His hands shook as he read the message, again confirming he hadn't misread it. They knew. Whoever tried to kill Victoria knew Marcus had saved her, knew his military background, and now they were threatening Zoe. He pulled the burner phone from his bedroom drawer's old habit from deployment, always maintained backup communications, and texted a number he hadn't used in 6 years. Tommy, need your help. Someone's hunting. And they brought my kid into it. The reply came 30 seconds later. Give me 2 hours. Stay inside. Lock the doors. Marcus checked every lock twice. Pushed furniture against the door. Retrieved the Beretta M9 from its locked case under his bed, the one piece of military hardware he'd kept when everything else got packed away. Loaded it with practiced efficiency while Zoe watched cartoons in the living room, oblivious. Then he called the number on Victoria Hartley's business card. She answered on the first ring. Mr. Washington, we need to talk about who tried to kill you and why they're threatening my daughter now. Silence on the line for 3 heartbeats. Where are you home? Queens, stay there. I'm sending security. We'll be there in 30 minutes. Ma'am, I do not need... Someone just threatened your child, Mr. Washington. Your pride can wait until we know she's safe. She hung up before he could argue. 28 minutes later, 3 black SUVs pulled up outside his building. Victoria emerged from the middle vehicle wearing jeans and a sweater that probably cost more than his car, surrounded by men in suits who moved like former military. Marcus met them in the hallway, Beretta tucked in his waistband under his shirt because he wouldn't open his door to anyone, not even a billionaire CEO, without being armed. Victoria's eyes went to the pistol outline immediately. You keep a service weapon, I keep a tool, same as a hammer. Can we come in? He stepped aside. The apartment suddenly felt microscopic with Victoria Hartley and 2 bodyguards filling the space. Zoe looked up from her cartoons, eyes wide. The pretty angel lady came to visit Victoria, smiled genuine warmth breaking through the Ice Queen exterior. Hi, Zoe. I wanted to check on your dad. Make sure he's okay. He's okay. He's always okay, even when he's not. Children and their brutal honesty. Victoria's gaze flickered to Marcus, reading volumes in that simple statement. Show Victoria your drawing, baby. The one you made. Zoe retrieved her sketchbook, flipped to the superhero picture, held it up with pride. That's Daddy saving you from the fire. I made the flames orange and red because those are hot colors. Victoria took the sketchbook with hands that trembled slightly. She stared at the crude drawing for long enough that Marcus wondered if she was going to decry. Thank you, Zoe. This is the nicest gift anyone's ever given me. You can keep it. Daddy says you look sad, so now you have a picture to remember you're not alone. Victoria did cry then, silent tears that tracked down her face while she knelt and hugged an 8-year-old who'd known her for 10 minutes. One of the bodyguards looked away, uncomfortable with displays of emotion. Marcus understood. Zoe had that effect. Sarah used to call their daughter an empath, someone who felt other people's pain and tried to fix it with crayon drawings and honest words. Mr. Washington, may we speak privately? There was a small bedroom off the living room, Zoe's room, decorated with her artwork and stuffed animals. Marcus led Victoria there while the bodyguard stayed with Zoe. Show me the message. He pulled out his phone, handed it over. Victoria read the text, her expression hardening into something cold and calculating. They know you're former military. They know you saved me, and they're willing to threaten a child. Who are they? That's what I need to find out. The fire marshal confirmed arson. Someone disabled the sprinkler system, locked the exits, and used accelerant. Professional job. They wanted me dead. Why, if I knew that they'd already be in prison? She handed back the phone, but her fingers lingered against his for half a second longer than necessary. I'm hiring private security for you and Zoe. 24-hour protection until we know what we're dealing with. I can't afford... I'm not asking you to pay, Mr. Washington. Someone tried to kill me. You prevented it. Now they're targeting your daughter because of me. That makes this my responsibility. I don't take charity. Her eyes flashed to anger breaking through the composed exterior. This isn't charity. This is survival. Your pride isn't more important than Zoe's safety. The words hit home because they were true. Marcus's jaw clenched. What do you want from me? I want you to let me help. And I want you to come with me, both of you, somewhere safer than this apartment that anyone could access. Where my home, Upper East Side, building security, private entrance, 24-hour surveillance. Until we catch whoever did this, you'll be safe there. I can't just move into your place. People will talk. Let them talk. I don't care about gossip, Mr. Washington. I care about preventing an 8-year-old from dying because someone wants to hurt me. She was right. Marcus hated that she was right. Hated that his pride was irrelevant in the face of real threat. Hated that accepting help from the woman whose company had killed his wife felt like betrayal. But Zoe's safety came first. Always. Okay, we'll come, but only until the threat is resolved. Then we're gone. Victoria nodded relief visible in the tension leaving her shoulders. Thank you. Don't thank me. Thank whatever sense you have left after breathing that smoke. A ghost of a smile touched her lips. Fair enough. They packed quickly closed Zoe's schoolwork, Sarah's photograph from the refrigerator, because Marcus couldn't leave that behind. The bodyguards loaded everything into the SUVs, while Zoe chattered excitedly about going to the pretty lady's house. During the drive to Manhattan, Marcus sat in silence, watching Queens give way to the East River, give way to the Upper East Side, where buildings cost more than most people earned in lifetimes. Victoria sat beside him, not speaking, respecting his need for quiet. Her penthouse occupied the entire top floor of a building on Park Avenue. The elevator required a key card and biometric scan. The living space was beautiful and cold, all clean lines and expensive furniture that looked uncomfortable and unlived in. Zoe's eyes went wide. Daddy, do angels live here? Victoria's expression flickered with something that might have been pain. No angels, just me. Then it's too big for just you. You must be lonely. Children and their brutal honesty. Victoria's breath caught. I suppose I am. Sometimes. Don't worry, we'll keep you company. Marcus wanted to correct her, explain this was temporary. They weren't staying long enough to provide company. But looking at Victoria's face at the naked loneliness his daughter had identified with surgical precision, he couldn't find the words. Morning light crept through floor-to-ceiling windows that transformed the city below into something almost beautiful. Marcus woke on the couch, body protesting angles designed for appearance rather than comfort. The penthouse maintained silence. Only money could buy triple-glazed glass walls thick enough to swallow sound climate control that whispered rather than hummed. He stood despite his leg's objection and moved toward Zoe's temporary room. Found her already awake, bent over her sketchbook with the concentration she'd inherited from her mother. Morning, baby? She looked up, grinned without reservation. Miss Victoria's shower talks. It asked me what temperature I wanted. I said warm, and it said, certainly, Miss Zoe. Like I'm fancy. You are fancy. No, I'm not. I'm just me. That's the fanciest thing to be. Victoria appeared in the doorway wearing workout clothes that probably cost more than Marcus's security deposit. Hair pulled back, no makeup, looking younger and more uncertain than the CEO who commanded boardrooms. Coffee, Marcus nodded and followed her to the kitchen. The espresso machine did indeed talk, offering 17 beverage options in 4 languages. He ignored it entirely, filled the electric kettle, found instant coffee in a cabinet that looked like it had never been opened. You're not using the $20,000 machine. Don't trust machines that have opinions about my coffee. Victoria leaned against the counter and watching him with curiosity that suggested this was unprecedented territory. Her kitchen, her space occupied by someone who knew what he was doing while she observed. My investigator worked through the night. He should have preliminary findings by this afternoon. How fast can he work? Fast enough. And he's motivated. His father lost everything to corporate embezzlement when he was 12. This is personal. Marcus poured boiling water over instant coffee that would offend anyone who cared about coffee. He didn't. Caffeine was fuel. What do we do until then? Stay here. Stay safe. Let security handle external surveillance while we wait for evidence. I need to work. You can't go back to Hartley Global. Not until we know who's hunting you. I have bills. Rent's due in 10 days. Mrs. Chen needs payment. I don't have the luxury of hiding. Victoria's jaw set in the way that suggested she was accustomed to solving problems with resources Marcus didn't possess. I'll cover your expenses. Rent Mrs. Chen everything. Consider it no. The word came out harder than intended. Victoria flinched. I don't take money I didn't earn. Then consider it compensation for helping me investigate whoever killed your wife. That math worked. Not charity, not payment, partnership. Fine. Until this is resolved. Agreed. Zoe interrupted it by announcing she was hungry, And did Victoria have anything besides expensive water and sad vegetables? Victoria looked genuinely lost. I could order breakfast or I could cook, if you have ingredients. They walked to a bodega 3 blocks away. Victoria in borrowed hoodie and jeans, first time in years, without designer labels. Security trailed at discreet distance. Marcus selected eggs, bread, bacon basics that couldn't be ruined. Back at the penthouse, he taught Victoria how to crack eggs without getting shells everywhere, how to tell when bacon was done without burning it, how bread became toast through applied heat and attention. Zoe supervised from her perch on a bar stool, offering commentary Marcus had learned to expect. Miss Victoria, you're supposed to flip it before it turns black. I'm trying. It's moving too fast. Food doesn't move. You're just slow. Victoria laughed, unguarded sound that transformed her face. They ate together at the dining table, Zoe between them, chattering about her drawing project. Marcus watched Victoria watch his daughter and saw something that made his chest ache. Longing, the kind that came from never having something rather than losing it. After breakfast, Marcus called his supervisor at Hartley Global, explained he needed emergency leave. The supervisor, who'd resented Marcus's perfect attendance for years, was delighted to have leverage. You're already short-staffed. This is irresponsible. My daughter's safety is more important than your staffing. Don't expect this to be paid. Never do. He hung up before the lecture could extend. Victoria had been listening, anger visible in her rigid posture. That's illegal. Denying paid emergency leave? Probably, but fighting it requires lawyers I can't afford and time I don't have. How much will you lose? Marcus calculated quickly. 3 weeks at minimum, possibly more. Rent, utilities, Mrs. Chen. Doesn't matter. It matters to me. You're losing income because of me. No, the firmness in his voice stopped her argument. Some things matter more than money. Teaching my daughter that integrity isn't negotiable is one of them. Victoria studied him for 3 seconds, then nodded. She didn't understand his position, but recognized when pushing would only entrench resistance. Your investigator. When does he report this afternoon, 2 o'clock? The hours until then passed in strange domesticity. Zoe did schoolwork while Victoria attempted to help with long division, despite admitting she hadn't thought about it since law school. Marcus cleaned and couldn't sit idle. Marine training ran too deep until Victoria physically removed supplies from his hands. You're a guest. Marines don't know how to be guests, only how to maintain operational readiness. This isn't a base. It's a home. Is it? The question landed with more weight than Marcus intended. Victoria glanced around her penthouse, beautiful, expensive, utterly sterile. I suppose it isn't. Not really. Just a place I sleep between work. That's not living. That's existing, says the man who worked night shift for 6 years and never took vacation. Touché. At 1:30, Victoria's phone rang. Her investigator. She answered on speaker. Tell me you have something, David. More than something. Everything. Victoria's expression sharpened into CEO mode. Marcus leaned forward, listening. Marcus Brennan has been embezzling from Hartley Global for 8 years. $78 million across 23 shell companies. Sophisticated operation would have been undetectable except for a pattern I found in Q4 reports from 6 years ago. 6 years ago. When Sarah died. Exactly. And I recovered an email from backup servers. Draft message never sent. Sarah Washington wrote it the day before her death. Addressed to you, Miss Hartley. Send it to me. Now. Already encrypted and en route. Victoria's laptop pinged. She opened the email, hands shaking slightly, read aloud. Dear Ms. Hartley, my name is Sarah Washington. I work in accounts payable. I've discovered something terrible and I don't know who to trust. CFO Marcus Brennan is embezzling. I have proof, but I'm scared. He has powerful friends. If anything happens to me, please look after my husband Marcus and my daughter Zoe. They deserve justice. I'm attaching the evidence. The room went silent. Marcus felt like he'd been punched. Sarah had tried to tell Victoria, had tried to protect him and Zoe, even knowing it might have cost her everything. And she'd been murdered before hitting send. She tried to warn you. Victoria's voice was barely a whisper. She tried to protect my company, and I never knew. You didn't know because Brennan made sure you couldn't. But Marcus felt the weight of it. Sarah had died trying to help a woman she'd never met, had left behind a husband and daughter to fight for people she'd never know. And Victoria carried that knowledge like a stone. What else did you find? David Victoria's CEO voice returned, pushing emotion aside to focus on mission. Brennan's been cleaning house. Two other executives died within a year of Sarah Washington. Both had access to the same financial systems. Both deaths ruled accidental. Statistical probability of that occurring naturally less than 1%. He eliminated witnesses. Exactly. And 3 nights ago, when you were reviewing those same Q4 reports, he tried to eliminate you. The board meeting tomorrow. What's his play? I've been monitoring communications. He's rallying board members claiming you're emotionally compromised after the fire, planning to vote you out, install himself as interim CEO. How many votes does he have? 4 confirmed, maybe 5. You need 6 to retain control. Marcus interrupted. The meeting is a trap. He wants you somewhere public-controlled environment where he can paint you as unstable. So I don't go. You have to go. Not going looks like fear. Looks like he's right about you being compromised. Then we prepare, anticipate his moves, and counter before he makes them. Why? Victoria turned to face him fully. You think I'm walking into that boardroom alone? I'm not a bodyguard. No, you're someone who spent 6 years watching that company, learning who has power and who has motive. You're someone who can read people the way I read balance sheets. I need that tomorrow. Marcus considered, rejected, reconsidered. If I'm there, it makes his argument stronger. Billionaire CEO bringing her janitor to board meetings. Looks exactly like the emotional compromise he's claiming. Unless we use it. Unless you're not just the janitor. Unless you're the husband of the woman who died discovering Brennan's crimes. The Marine veteran who saved my life. The man who's been investigating his wife's murder for 6 years. That exposes everything. Yes, but exposure is the only play we have. He's counting on you staying invisible. We take away that advantage. Marcus thought about Zoe, about 6 years of hiding, about the safety that came from being unseen. Then thought about Sarah, about justice delayed, about teaching his daughter that standing up mattered more than staying safe. Okay, we expose him, but we do it right. Evidence so overwhelming he can't squirm out. Victoria smiled, fierce expression that promised violence wrapped in boardroom courtesy. Then let's build a case. They worked through the afternoon. Victoria accessed company files remotely, pulling 8 years of financial data. Marcus reviewed documents David had compiled, looking for patterns his military intelligence training taught him to recognize. Shell companies with addresses that didn't exist. Contracts for services never rendered. Invoices paid to vendors with no employees, no physical locations, no evidence they'd ever existed beyond paperwork. Brennan had been meticulous. But meticulous wasn't perfect. He'd left traces, small patterns that individually meant nothing but collectively painted, damning picture. By 6 p.m., they had comprehensive documentation. Enough to convince a board, enough to trigger criminal investigation, enough to destroy a man who'd spent 15 years building his theft. Zoe drew while they worked, occasionally showing them pictures of families holding hands. Always 3 people, always together. At 7, Victoria ordered dinner. Not from fancy restaurants, this time pizza from a place in Queens that Marcus recognized, the same place he and Zoe went for special occasions. You remembered. Zoe mentioned it when we were in the car, said it was your favorite. The thoughtfulness of that, the attention to small details that mattered, hit Marcus harder than grand gestures would have. They ate pizza on the couch, Zoe between them, tomato sauce on her chin, chattering about whether penguins had knees. Victoria engaged, completely debating with an 8-year-old like the conversation mattered more than billion-dollar deals. After Zoe went to bed, Marcus found Victoria on the balcony. Their spot now where difficult conversations happened away from small ears. Tomorrow could go badly. I know. If Brennan has more board members than we think, you could lose your company. I know that too. Then why risk it? Why not let David feed information to authorities? Let them build a case, stay out of it. Because Sarah died trying to protect my company. Because you've spent 6 years searching for justice. Because some things matter more than safety. Marcus moved to stand beside her, looking out at Manhattan's lights. Sarah would have liked you. The words came out quieter than intended. Victoria turned to face him. Would she? Yeah. She collected strays. People who needed somewhere to belong. You're a stray, Victoria. Rich stray, but stray nonetheless. I suppose I am. Not anymore. Now you're chosen. Chosen by whom? By a 7-year-old who sees people clearly. By her father who's trying very hard not to feel things he probably shouldn't feel. Victoria's breath caught. What things? Marcus turned to face her fully. Honesty had gotten him this far. Things that are complicated, things that are wetty, things that are terrifying because I haven't felt them since Sarah, and I don't know if I'm allowed to feel them again. Who says you're not allowed? Me. The version of me that thinks 6 years is both forever and not long enough. The version that thinks loving again means betraying her memory, or it means honoring her memory by living instead of just surviving. They stood close enough that Marcus could see gold flecks in Victoria's blue eyes, close enough to smell her shampoo, something floral and expensive that shouldn't work but did. Ask me again after tomorrow, after the board meeting, after we've destroyed the man who killed my wife. Then maybe I'll have an answer. I can wait. Can you? Question hung between them like a challenge. Victoria smiled. I've waited 32 years to feel like this. I can wait another day. Morning arrived with the weight of impending confrontation. Marcus woke early, found Victoria already in her office reviewing their presentation. Zoe still slept, dreaming of things 8-year-olds dreamed about: butterflies and families and worlds where people stayed. You ready? Victoria looked up, exhaustion visible beneath expensive concealer. I've been preparing for hostile boardrooms since I was 23, but this feels different. Because this time it's personal. Because this time I'm not fighting for the company. I'm fighting for what's right. Those aren't always the same thing. They left Zoe with Patricia, the security guard who'd become her favorite. Zoe made them pinky promise they'd come back, made Victoria promise twice. The drive to Hartley Global Tower took 23 minutes through morning traffic. Marcus watched Victoria transform softer edges, hardening vulnerability, replaced by armor. By the time they arrived, she was the Ice Queen again. CEO, weapon. The 68th floor had been repaired with shocking speed. New carpet, fresh paint, no evidence that attempted murder had occurred here 72 hours ago. The boardroom doors opened at 1:55. 9 board members sat around the table. Marcus Brennan at the head, smile practiced and predatory. He stood when Victoria entered. Victoria, thank God. We were concerned you might not attend. I appreciate the concern, but this company doesn't run itself. Indeed. Although I see you've brought company, Brennan's eyes locked onto Marcus with recognition and calculation. This is Marcus Washington. He saved my life during the fire, and he has information relevant to this meeting. Mr. Washington, the janitor. Extraordinary that you were nearby when the fire started. The implication was clear. Brennan was floating the possibility that Marcus had started the fire. Smart. Preemptive strike. I was 3 floors down when I smelled accelerant. Military training taught me to recognize threats. Military. Impressive. Though one wonders why a decorated Marine works as a janitor. Personal difficulties. Let's skip personal histories and address why we're here. Victoria connected her laptop to the boardroom display. Financial documents filled the screen. Marcus Brennan has embezzled $78 million from Hartley Global through shell companies and fraudulent contracts. I have complete documentation. The room erupted, board members talking over each other, shock and denial creating chaos. Brennan's face remained carefully neutral. Serious allegations, Victoria. I hope you have more than documents. Those can be fabricated. I have more. I have testimony from the widow of the woman who discovered your theft 8 years ago. Victoria pulled up Sarah's photograph. Young, beautiful, alive. Sarah Washington, accountant. Found evidence of your embezzlement in Q4 reports. Died 2 days later when her brake lines were cut. Car accident, except it wasn't an accident. You're suggesting I murdered someone. This is absurd. Grief has made you paranoid. Here's the email Sarah wrote before she died. Victoria displayed the recovered draft. Sarah's words to a CEO she'd never meet, trying to save a company while knowing it might cost everything. She died trying to protect Hartley Global. Marcus, her husband, has spent 6 years searching for proof. And 3 nights ago, when I got too close to discovering what Sarah found, you tried to kill me too. Fantasy. You have no proof I was involved. I have the fire marshal's report showing professional arson. I have your presence in the building during the time accelerant was placed. I have testimony from maintenance that you ordered the sprinkler system disabled for testing that afternoon. Circumstantial. None of this proves, and I have this. Marcus had been silent. Now he pulled out his phone, played an audio file. Brennan's voice filled the room. The fire failed. She's alive. Washington saved her. Yes, the janitor, he's the husband. I don't know how he figured it out. We need to eliminate both of them. And the kid. Loose ends. Silence crashed over the boardroom like a wave. Every face turned toward Brennan, his careful neutrality shattered rage bleeding through. Where did you get that illegal recording inadmissible? Not illegal when recording threats against your own life. Very admissible in criminal proceedings. Victoria gestured toward the door. Two NYPD detectives entered, badges displayed. Marcus Brennan, you're under arrest for embezzlement, arson, conspiracy to commit murder, and the murder of Sarah Washington. The detectives moved with practiced efficiency. Brennan stood, knocked his chair backward with violence that made several board members flinch. You're nothing. A washed-up Marine playing janitor, Marcus stepped forward, voice deadly calm. I'm the man who kept my wife's memory alive for 6 years. The man who raised our daughter alone. The man who just destroyed your empire while you were too arrogant to see it coming. Brennan lunged. Marcus sidestepped with combat reflexes, let momentum carry Brennan past him into the detective's waiting arms. They cuffed him efficiently, read rights he wasn't listening to. The boardroom erupted with apologies to Victoria, outrage at betrayal, questions about recovery. Victoria handled them with authority that came from years of command training. Marcus slipped out during the chaos. He'd done what he came for. Justice for Sarah. Proof that her death meant something. He found Victoria in her office 2 hours later. She sat behind a desk the size of his apartment, staring at nothing. You did it. We did it. Sarah would be proud. I hope so. Though I can't stop thinking if I'd paid attention 8 years ago, if I'd noticed the patterns sooner, she might be alive. You can't torture yourself with what-ifs. Sarah made her choice knowing the risk. She tried to protect people she'd never meet because it was right, by making sure her death wasn't meaningless, by making sure Brennan pays. Victoria stood, moved to stand close. Too close for professional distance. Thank you for everything. Just finishing what Sarah started. No, you're giving Zoe justice, giving her proof that her mother mattered it. That's worth more than revenge. They stood close enough that Marcus could feel warmth radiating from Victoria despite the cold office air. Close enough that wanting something became harder to deny. There's a gala tomorrow night, annual charity event. Board expects me to attend. I want you there. I'm not gala material. You're exactly gala material. You're the reason I'm alive. The man who exposed corporate fraud. The hero. I'm a janitor who got lucky. You're the man who chose to be seen. Let people see you tomorrow, too. What about Zoe? She comes, obviously. I wouldn't dream of leaving her behind. Marcus wanted to refuse, wanted to protect his daughter from society's judgment. But looking at Victoria's face, at the vulnerability beneath her CEO armor, he couldn't. Okay, but only because you asked. Victoria smiled, genuine expression that transformed her face. That's all the reason I need. That evening, after returning to the penthouse, Marcus found Zoe asleep in the guest room, her sketchbook open beside her. He picked it up, careful not to wake her. The drawing showed 3 figures standing in front of a building with many windows. Inside the windows, smaller figures, children. The 3 main figures held hands. Above them, written in Zoe's careful block letters, our forever family and the kids we help. Marcus stared at the drawing, throat tight. His daughter had been planning this. Had been seeing a future he'd been too afraid to imagine. He found Victoria in the kitchen making tea. She looked up when he entered. Everything okay? Yeah, just Zoe's drawing. She's already designed our future, foundation for kids who lost parents. All 3 of us working there. Victoria set down her mug, moved closer. Is that what you want? Marcus looked at the drawing again, at his daughter's vision of a family she'd never had, but somehow knew she deserved. Yeah, I think it is. Then let's make it real. How I resign from Hartley Global in 6 months. We build the Sarah Washington Memorial Foundation. Help kids like Zoe who lost parents too young. You use your security experience. I use my resources. We do something that matters. You'd give up being CEO. I'd trade being CEO for being human, for having a family, for waking up to something more than empty penthouse and balance sheets. That's a big sacrifice. No. Sacrifice is what you did giving up your career to raise Zoe alone. This is just choosing life over existence. Marcus set down the drawing, moved to face Victoria fully. After tomorrow, after the gala, after we faced society and survived, ask me then what I want. And what will you say? I'll say yes to the foundation, to trying this, to whatever comes next. Victoria's smile was incandescent. Then I can wait one more day. The Plaza Hotel glittered like a monument to excess on Friday evening in late October. Crystal chandeliers refracted light into 1,000 fragments. Marble floors reflected guests in formal wear, who moved with practiced ease born from inherited wealth. Marcus stood near the entrance in a borrowed tuxedo that didn't quite fit sleeves, half an inch too short, shoulders tight across his back, feeling like an imposter. Zoe wore navy silk Victoria had selected, spinning in small circles to watch fabric flare. His daughter had transformed from Queen's apartment girl to someone who belonged among Manhattan elite. The metamorphosis unsettled him. Victoria emerged from coat check and silver that caught light with every movement, hair swept up to expose her neck, diamonds at her throat worth more than Marcus would earn in 5 years. You clean up nice, Marine. Could say the same. Ready to face judgment. Been in worse situations. Not sure that's accurate. Society bites differently than insurgents. They entered together. Cameras flashed. Conversations paused mid-sentence. Marcus heard fragments. The janitor, her hero, inappropriate, and ignored them with discipline earned through years of invisibility. Zoe grabbed his hand, squeezed 3 times. Their signal. I'm here, you're not alone. He squeezed back 4 times. I know. Thank you. The crowd parted as they moved through. Some guests nodded with respect. Others turned away, judgment, written in stiff shoulders and averted gazes. Marcus cataloged reactions with military precision, identifying potential threats out of habit. Charles Hammond approached first. 70 years old board member, old money from families that built railroads. He extended his hand without hesitation. Mr. Washington, heard what you did at the board meeting. Exposing Brennan, that took courage. Just wanted justice for my wife. You got it, and saved this company in the process. Charles turned to Victoria. You've chosen well. Keep this one close. He walked away, leaving Marcus processing the interaction. Respect from old money felt surreal. Patricia Hammond appeared next, a Charles's wife board member who'd voted against Victoria more times than for her. She studied Marcus with the assessment that came from decades evaluating character. Mr. Washington, I owe you an apology. Ma'am, I judged you by your tax bracket rather than your character. That was wrong. I knew your wife, Sarah, briefly. She consulted on a financial audit for me. Brilliant woman, I didn't know what happened to her. She was murdered. For discovering Brennan's embezzlement, Patricia's expression shifted to something that might have been shame. Then I'm doubly sorry for your loss, for not digging deeper when I should have. You didn't know, I should have. That's on me. She turned to Victoria. This is a good man, Victoria. Don't let society's small-mindedness drive him away. Patricia moved on, leaving Marcus slightly stunned. Zoe tugged his sleeve. I told you people would like you once they knew you. Some people, the ones who matter. The band started playing. Couples moved toward the dance floor. Victoria's hand found his. Dance with me, I don't know how. Neither do I, but we can figure it out together. She led him to the dance floor while Zoe went to join other children near the dessert display. Marcus's hands found Victoria's waist, her hands his shoulders, and they moved with the awkwardness of people learning each other's rhythms. Charles offered me a job today. Victoria's eyes widened. What kind of job? Corporate security. His company, $65,000 starting, full benefits schedule. I can work around Zoe. That's incredible, Marcus. Is it, or is it because of you? Because I'm the billionaire's janitor boyfriend. The word boyfriend hung between them. First time either had named what was building. It's because you impressed him at the board meeting. Charles doesn't waste time on charity cases. If he's offering, he sees genuine potential. What did you tell him when he called? That you're too proud to accept anything that feels like pity, but smart enough to recognize real opportunity. And if I stop being invisible, then you teach Zoe that hiding isn't the same as safety, that standing in the light matters more than staying in shadows. They turned slowly, the music something orchestral Marcus didn't recognize. Victoria's perfume was subtle, expensive, but not overwhelming. I'm terrified. The admission cost him. Marines didn't confess fear. Of what? Of this. Of you. Of letting Zoe get attached and then losing you when you realize I'm not enough. Not enough. I'm a janitor with PTSD, bad credit, and a daughter who deserves better than I can give her. Victoria stopped dancing, forced him to meet her eyes. You're a decorated war hero who raised his daughter alone while pursuing justice for 6 years. You run into burning buildings because it's right. You teach your child that love matters more than money. That's not enough. That's extraordinary. For now, until reality sets in. What if reality is this? What if we're exactly what each other needs? Before Marcus could respond, commotion erupted near the entrance. Raised voices, security moving with purpose. Margaret Sterling burst into the ballroom. Victoria's aunt, her mother's sister, radiating fury. Victoria. The single word cut through conversation like a blade. Victoria's body went rigid against Marcus. He felt her transform from warm to ice queen, in seconds armor snapping into place. Aunt Margaret, this is unexpected. We need to speak. Privately. We can speak here. Margaret's gaze raked over Marcus with contempt that made earlier judgments look generous. Not in front of him. His name is Marcus, and anything you have to say can be said in front of him. Margaret's expression hardened. Fine. Since you've chosen public humiliation, we'll discuss it publicly. This relationship is destroying what's left of your reputation. 4 board members expressing concern. Stock price dropped after photos of you with him circulated. Stock prices fluctuate. My personal life is irrelevant. Your personal life becomes relevant when it affects shareholder value. This man, she couldn't even say his name, is clearly after your money. A janitor suddenly involved with a billionaire. The optics are disastrous. Zoe appeared from nowhere, positioned herself between Margaret and Marcus with 8-year-old fearlessness. My daddy doesn't want her money. Children should be seen and not heard. And mean ladies should learn manners. My daddy's a hero. He saved Miss Victoria's life. He caught a bad man who killed my mama. What have you done? The ballroom had gone silent. 300 people watching an 8-year-old face down Manhattan society with nothing but conviction. Marcus gently pulled Zoe back, but his voice carried to every corner when he spoke. You're right about optics. They're terrible. A decorated Marine works as a janitor because it's the only job with flexible hours to raise his daughter after his wife was murdered. A CEO so lonely, she forgot what home feels like. Those are terrible optics. They're also true. How dare you know? How dare you judge what you don't understand? Your niece is the first person to see me human instead of furniture in 6 years. She's the first person to make my daughter feel safe since her mother died. She's the first thing that's felt right since Sarah's funeral. He turned to Victoria, gave her the choice he had been denying her. Do you want me to leave? Victoria's eyes were wet, but her voice was steel. No, I want you to stay. And Aunt Margaret, you can leave. Now, Victoria, be reasonable. The board answers to me. My personal life answers to no one. You're making a mistake, just like your mother made choosing your father. Look how that ended, dead and disgraced. My mother died because she couldn't afford the fight. I can, and I choose to fight for what matters. Marcus matters. His daughter matters. They matter more than stock prices or your outdated ideas about class. We're trying to protect you and don't need protection. I need people who see me as human instead of asset. Marcus does that. If you can't accept it, there's the door. Margaret and her husband exchanged looks. They'd lost. Margaret drew herself up with wounded dignity. When this falls apart, and it will, don't expect us to pick up the pieces. They swept out with theatrical flourish, leaving ripples of conversation. Victoria swayed slightly. Marcus caught her elbow. You okay? I just burned bridges with my only living relatives. Ask me again tomorrow. For what it's worth, that was the bravest thing I've seen since Fallujah. She laughed, sound slightly hysterical. I'm terrified. I just chose you over family, over social acceptance, over everything I was raised to value. Tell me I didn't make a mistake. You didn't make a mistake. How do you know? Because I'm terrified too. And being scared together means this is real. They stood in the center of the ballroom, 300 people watching, and Marcus realized he'd crossed a line he couldn't uncross. No going back to anonymous janitor. No pretending this hadn't happened. No protecting himself from possibility of loss. He'd chosen to be seen, chosen Victoria, chosen hope over safety. Zoe appeared again, grabbed both their hands. Can we go home now? This party's boring and I want pancakes. What's the drawing you finished, you, and Daddy, and me, in front of a building full of kids, our forever family? The casual certainty in her voice made Marcus's throat tight. Children saw truth adults spent years denying. Let's go home. Victoria called for her car. They slipped through a side exit, avoiding photographers settled into the Mercedes while the driver navigated Manhattan traffic. Zoe fell asleep between them, head on Victoria's lap, feet in Marcus's. Thank you for staying, for not letting my aunt drive you away. Wasn't going to let anyone decide my life except me. Spent too many years being invisible because it was safe. Time to be seen. Even though it's terrifying, especially because it's terrifying. Victoria's hand found his across Zoe's sleeping form, fingers interlacing with ease that suggested this was meant to be. Charles's job offer. Are you taking it? Yeah, I think I am. 65,000 is life-changing. Could move out of Queens, get Zoe into better schools, stop living paycheck to paycheck. What stopped you before fear that accepting means admitting this is real? That I'm not just surviving anymore. That I deserve more than existence. You do deserve more. Zoe deserves more. Sarah would want you to have more. The invocation of his dead wife should have felt wrong. Instead, it felt like permission. Yeah, she would. They rode in silence, Marcus processing seismic shifts happening too fast to fully comprehend. 3 weeks ago, he'd been invisible janitor with no prospects. Now he held hands with a billionaire while his daughter slept peacefully between them. The penthouse felt different when they arrived. Less sanctuary, more home. Subtle transformation that happened when people invested emotion in spaces. Marcus carried Zoe to bed, removed her dress, and replaced it with pajamas, while she mumbled about Monets and water lilies. He sat on the edge of her bed, watching her breathe, overwhelmed by love and terror. Daddy, her voice was small, mostly asleep. Yeah, baby. Are we keeping Miss Victoria? The question destroyed him in the best possible way. Would you like that? She makes you smile. And she's not lonely anymore, so yes, then we'll try. Zoe smiled, already drifting toward dreams. Marcus found Victoria on the balcony, their spot where honest conversations happen. Is she asleep? Yeah. Asked if we're keeping you. What did you tell her that we'll try? Victoria turned from the city view to face him fully. I'm going to resign from Hartley Global, effective in 6 months after proper transition. Marcus's chest tightened. Because of me, because of me. Because I've spent 15 years building a company my father loved more than he loved me. Because I want to do something meaningful. Build a foundation for kids who lost parents too young. Kids like Zoe who deserve support. That's a huge decision. It's the right decision. I want purpose, connection, to come home to people who care about me instead of what I can do for them. What if it fails? What if you regret giving up the company? Then I'll have failed trying something meaningful instead of succeeding at something empty. Marcus moved closer, hands finding her waist. You're remarkable. I'm terrified. Does that count? Especially that, he kissed her. First time, their first real kiss. Nothing like kissing Sarah had been, because Victoria was a different person with different needs. But it was right in ways he'd stopped believing right could feel. She responded with hunger that surprised them both. Hands in his hair, his hands spanning her back, both learning each other through touch. When they broke apart, both breathing hard, Victoria's expression was vulnerable. Stay. Not just tonight. Stay with me. You and Zoe. Make this home. Victoria, we've known each other 3 weeks. I don't care. I've been alone my entire life. I don't want to be alone anymore. I want morning coffee and drawings on my refrigerator. I want you. What if it doesn't work? Then we'll have tried. We'll have chosen hope over fear. And Zoe will have seen her father choose to live instead of just survive. Marcus wanted to argue, wanted to protect himself and his daughter from potential heartbreak. But standing on this balcony with Victoria in his arms, he couldn't find words to refuse. Okay, we'll stay. We'll try. But if it starts hurting Zoe, if she shows any signs of damage, I walk. Her well-being comes first. Always. I wouldn't want it any other way. They stood together watching the city lights, two people who'd been alone too long, choosing terrifying possibility of connection. 1 week later, at 3 in the morning, Marcus woke to crying from Zoe's room. He found his daughter, burning with fever, skin hot to touch, breathing shallow and rapid. "Daddy, I can't breathe right." Victoria appeared in the doorway, hair disheveled. "What's wrong, fever?" "High," and her breathing's labored. "Hospital." "No time, this is anaphylaxis. Severe allergic reaction. She needs epinephrine now." Marcus was already moving marine training, overriding panic. He checked Zoe's pulse, rapid but strong. Checked her pupils, responsive. Listened to her breathing, labored but not critical yet. "How do you know, combat medic? Seen this in the field." He grabbed the EpiPen from the first aid kit, administered the appropriate dose with hands that didn't shake despite the fear screaming in his head. "Breathe, baby. Focus on my voice. In through your nose, out through your mouth. Count with me. 1, 2, 3, 4. Zoe's breathing started to ease. Color returned to her face. The fever began breaking. Victoria watched with something like awe. "You just saved her life. Just training." "No, that was more than training. You assessed, acted, didn't panic. That's who you are." After Zoe fell asleep again, crisis averted, Victoria pulled Marcus into the hallway. "That was incredible. The way you handled that. Just muscle memory. It's more than that. You stay calm when everything's falling apart. You save people. I couldn't save Sarah." The words came out broken. Victoria's arms wrapped around him. "You couldn't have saved Sarah, but you saved me. You saved Zoe tonight. You're saving yourself by learning to live again. That counts for everything." Marcus held her while something he'd been carrying for 6 years finally loosened its grip. Permission to be human. Permission to fail. Permission to love again without betraying memory. 3 months dissolved into rhythm that felt inevitable. Marcus took Charles's job, excelled at corporate security. With precision, he'd applied to military intelligence. Within 2 months, he was leading teams. Within 4 months, consulting with executives. Within 6 months, earning $90,000 with promises of 6 figures. Victoria began transitioning out of Hartley Global, grooming her successor while building infrastructure for the foundation that would become her legacy. The Sarah Washington Memorial Foundation, dedicated to supporting children who'd lost parents to violence or tragedy. When Victoria showed him the name, Marcus cried, held her while explaining it was perfect and Sarah would to be honored. "And thank you for making my wife's death mean something beyond loss." Zoe thrived. New school with arts programs. Therapy for grief with someone who understood childhood trauma. Friends whose parents didn't measure worth by bank accounts. The drawing that hung on their refrigerator showed 3 figures in front of a brownstone building with windows full of children's faces. Caption in Zoe's careful handwriting, "Our forever family and the kids we help." They moved from the penthouse to a brownstone in Park Slope, compromise between Marcus's need for normal neighborhood and Victoria's resources. Large enough for 3 people, and occasional guests, small enough that every room got used. Marcus cooked most nights. Victoria learned to help without disasters, though she remained spectacularly incompetent at anything beyond basic tasks. Zoe supervised with benevolent authority. They became family in the way families form, when people choose each other instead of being born into obligation. Slowly then, all at once, until Marcus couldn't remember life before Victoria, and Victoria couldn't imagine mornings without Marcus's terrible coffee. The foundation launched on a Saturday in May, 8 months after the fire that brought them together. The brownstone had been renovated into spaces designed for healing, art therapy rooms, music studios, counseling offices staffed by people who understood loss. Marcus stood in the completed building, feeling Sarah's presence. "What do you think?" Victoria appeared beside him, paint-stained and exhausted. "I think Sarah would love this." "I hope so. I hope she knows we didn't forget." No one who knew her could forget. The first families arrived at 9. 6 children between ages 7 and 11 who'd lost parents in the past year. 6 sets of eyes that had seen too much, 6 hearts learning to beat around holes that would never fully heal. Zoe greeted them like visiting royalty, showed them the art room. Within minutes, the children were drawing, hesitant at first, then with increasing confidence. Marcus worked with one boy, 8 years old, whose father had died in a construction accident. The kid was angry in ways Marcus recognized. It's not fair. No, it's not. Everyone says it gets better. Does it? Marcus knelt to eye level, gave honesty instead of platitudes. It changes. The pain doesn't go away, but it becomes something you can carry instead of something that carries you. Eventually, you'll realize you went a whole day without crying. Then a week. That feels like betrayal at first, but eventually it feels like healing. Did your person die? My wife, 6 years ago, murdered. At least someone got punished. Does that help? Marcus considered lying? Instead gave truth. Some. But it doesn't bring her back. Justice matters, but it doesn't fill the hole. What fills the hole? This. Helping kids like you. Watching my daughter grow up strong. Building something that matters. Living instead of just surviving. The boy nodded slowly, processing wisdom that shouldn't be necessary at 8. Victoria worked with a girl whose mother had died of cancer, teaching her that grief could be transformed into art. By afternoon, the walls were covered with drawings, families fragmented and reformed pain, made visible hope expressed in primary colors. At 3, they gathered everyone in the main room. Marcus stood with Victoria Zoe between them. This foundation exists because someone cared enough to fight for truth. Sarah Washington discovered fraud and died trying to expose it. She left behind a husband and daughter who spent 6 years searching for justice. They found it. But more importantly, they found purpose. Victoria's hand found Marcus's. We can't bring back the people you have lost, but we can offer space where grief is honored, where children learn they're not alone, where families rebuild. Marcus stepped forward. 6 years ago, I lost my wife. 2 months ago, I met Victoria when she almost died in a fire. We're standing here because we chose hope, because we believe connection matters more than protection. Zoe raised her hand. Victoria nodded. You're allowed to be sad, but you're also allowed to be happy, and you're allowed to build new families. Miss Victoria isn't my mama, but she's family, because families are people who choose each other, and we choose you. The simplicity destroyed several parents. One mother sobbed openly. Children who'd been holding themselves together allowed themselves to crack. After everyone left, after staff went home, Marcus and Victoria and Zoe stood in the empty space they'd built. We did it. Sarah did it. We just carried it forward. Think she'd approve. Marcus pulled out his phone, showed them the photograph. Sarah at 26 laughing alive, gone. Yeah, she'd approve. Zoe studied the photograph. She looks nice. Like she gave good hugs. The best hugs. And she would have loved you. Even though I'm loud, especially because you're loud. Your mama was the same. Victoria watched them, this father and daughter who'd survived impossible loss and built something beautiful. She thought about her own mother, the woman who'd left when Victoria was 7 because she couldn't afford to fight. But she also felt hope, because Marcus and Zoe had taught her that family wasn't about blood, but about choice. They locked the foundation and walked home through park-sloped streets where children played and neighbors waved. Zoe skipped ahead, announcing celebration pancakes. Marcus's phone buzzed. Text from Tommy Rodriguez. Saw the news about the foundation. Sarah would be proud, brother. Marcus showed Victoria. Your Marines keep track. Once a Marine, always a Marine. Good brothers. Lucky you. Yeah, lucky me. They walked hand in hand, this warrior who'd learned to live again, and this queen who'd learned to be human. At home, Marcus cooked while Victoria helped without disasters. Zoe set the table with mismatched plates, creating aesthetic chaos that worked. They ate together. Zoe talked about the foundation kids. Victoria mentioned her final board meeting where she'd officially resigned. Marcus listened to both these people who'd become his world and felt something he hadn't felt since Sarah died. Complete. Not healed. Grief didn't heal, but complete in the way people are complete when they've found their place and purpose and people. After dinner, they reviewed applications. 200 for 40 spaces. Every story heartbreaking. Every child deserved help. We need to expand. We've been open 6 hours, and we already have 5 times more applicants. Kids need this, so we raise more money, build bigger infrastructure, using your money, our money, and Charles donated $500,000. Patricia matched it. We're not doing this alone. No, we're not. Marcus looked around at the life they'd built. Zoe's drawings covered walls. Photographs clustered on surfaces, wedding photos, baby pictures, foundation, construction. progress. Evidence of time passing and grief transforming into something that allowed joy. I love you. The words came out simple. Just truth. Victoria set down her file, moved beside him. I love you too. I love that you make terrible coffee. I love how you are with Zoe. I love that you spent 6 years pursuing justice. I love your broken parts and whole parts and everything between. Even though I'm damaged, you're not damaged. You're a survivor. There's a difference. Sarah would have liked you, I hope so. I was a stray, rich stray but stray. Not anymore. Now you're chosen. They sat together watching Zoe draw. This child who'd been motherless for 6 years learning what maternal presence felt like. Marcus's phone buzzed. Text from Carlos. Proud of you, man. You earned this, he showed Victoria. Your old coworkers pay attention. They're good people trying to survive. Not everyone spent 6 years investigating murder while raising a daughter alone. No. But everyone has struggles. We're just visible now. You're special to me, and you're special to me. But let's not forget we're just people who got lucky. Luck and choice. We chose to trust, chose hope over fear. Yeah, we did. Zoe announced she was done, held up her drawing. 3 figures in front of the foundation, children's faces in windows, sun overhead, painted bright yellow. Caption, Where Love Still Lives. The title destroyed them. Marcus pulled Zoe into his lap while Victoria pressed against his side, and they held each other, looking at artwork that captured everything they'd built from loss. Sarah had died protecting people she'd never meet. Victoria had almost died before learning loneliness wasn't inevitable. Marcus had survived combat and grief and 6 years of watching. Zoe had grown up without a mother, but learned to build family from choice. And somehow, impossibly, it led here. To a brownstone in Park Slope. To a foundation helping children carry grief. To 3 people who loved each other despite every reason not to risk connection. The fire that brought them together was 8 months past. Brennan was in prison facing 30 years. Sarah's death had been reclassified as homicide, justice achieved. The world had kept spinning, and 3 people who'd been alone learned the bravest thing you can do is stop surviving and start living. Where love still lives. In foundations built from grief. In families chosen rather than inherited. In warriors who learned to be soft and queens who learned to be human. In morning coffee and drawings on refrigerators. Love lived in the space between loss and hope. In the choice to trust despite knowing trust can break. In the decision to be seen despite knowing visibility means vulnerability. Marcus kissed Zoe's head, squeezed Victoria's hand, and felt something he'd thought died with Sarah. Peace. Not the absence of pain that would always be there, but peace with the pain. Peace with the bomb. Peace with a future he hadn't planned but was learning to embrace. One day at a time. One choice at a time. One act of courage at a time. That was enough. That was everything.